right. Good afternoon, everyone. In a short while, we will be joined in person by the UN Development Programs Administrator, Achim Steiner, and virtually by the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for Yemen, David Gressley, who's speaking from Aden. They will provide an update on the UN coordinated efforts to remove more than 1 million barrels of oil from the FSO Safar oil tanker. And the Secretary General has just now returned to New York from Ukraine. And this afternoon at 3 p.m., he will meet with member states to launch 2 policy briefs to inform their thinking as they prepare for the Sustainable Development Goals Summit and the Summit of the Future. These first 2 policy briefs are intended to start the consideration by member states of the decisions and changes needed to equip the multilateral system for the challenges of today and the future. We will publish 9 more by July. The goal is simple, the Secretary General will say, to breathe new life into the multilateral system so that it can deliver on the promises of the United Nations Charter and the 2030 Agenda. In Doha today, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, took part in the closing plenary of the 5th Conference on the Least Developed Countries, also known as LDC-5. Ms. Mohammed told participants that throughout the week, we have seen what can be achieved through genuine partnership and multilateral dialogue. She added that the Doha Program of Action represents a clear blueprint for recovery, renewal, and resilience in the world's most vulnerable countries. Throughout the conference, member states committed to measures to deliver on the Doha Program of Action, the 10-year plan adopted last year to put the world's 46 most vulnerable countries back on track to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Some measures agreed by the program include the development of a food stockholding mechanism for least developed countries, an online university focusing on STEM education, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, especially for women and girls, an international investment support center, a sustainable graduation support facility, and comprehensive crisis mitigation and resilience building measures for these countries. You can find much more on the commitment made by specific parties online. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the country has experienced another massive wave of strikes that once again kill civilians in several regions of the country. They also struck civilian infrastructure in many parts, including the capital, Kiev. The strikes, the first of this type in more than a month, hit power infrastructure across the country. In Kiev, nearly 40% of the people have been left without heat, while 15% of homes and businesses lost access to electricity, according to authorities. In Kharkiv, it's been reported that the entire population of the city, 1.4 million people, has no heating, electricity, and water. In Kherson, the local authorities and our partners on the ground tells us that at least 3 civilians were killed at a bus stop in the city center, which was understood to be hit by a missile. Civilians were also killed and injured in Lviv, close to the border with Poland, and houses and other infrastructure were damaged in Zaporizhzhya and other frontline regions. As the Secretary General stressed yesterday in Kiev, the United Nations has stayed on the ground, delivering desperately needed humanitarian aid to millions of people in Ukraine. And also today, Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, said that the Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant lost all off-site power. He noted that this is the first time the site has lost all power since the 23rd of November 2022, and follows reports of missile strikes across Ukraine overnight. He pointed out that this is the 6th time the plant has had to operate in an emergency mode, stressing that this cannot go on and that he's astonished by the complacency. Mr. Grossi warned that each time we are rolling dice, and if we allow this to continue time after time, then one day our luck will run out. He emphasized that we must commit to protecting the safety and security of the plant, and we need to commit now. Mr. Grossi said that he will continue his urgent consultations and contacts. Our peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, MONUSCO, reported that suspected allied democratic forces killed at least 38 civilians, injured 10, and abducted several others. This happened in 2 separate attacks in Mukondi and Mausa, located some 20 kilometers south of Beni in the North Kivu province. Joint operations by the Congolese and the Ugandan armed forces are ongoing in this area. Our colleagues at the peacekeeping mission condemn in the strongest terms the brutal attacks against civilians and call for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Turning to Syria, we continue to ramp up the response across the country where at least 8.8 million people have been affected. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the earthquakes, among other factors, significantly affected the cholera response. Our partners launched a cholera vaccination campaign in earthquake-hit areas of northwest Syria on Tuesday. They plan to distribute 1.7 million vaccine doses in high-risk areas. More than 53,000 suspected cholera cases and 23 associated deaths have been reported in northwest Syria as of the 5th of March. Also, more than 10,000 people in communities where water infrastructure was damaged have received water since the start of the response across affected areas. Humanitarian workers have also provided hygiene kits to more than 100,000 people in reception centers. Our colleagues also tell us that 3.7 million children in earthquake-affected areas across Syria are facing the risk of contracting diseases and lack access to basic services. To date, the Syria Earthquake Flash Appeal has received $218 million, or 55% of the nearly $400 million needed. On Türkiye, we continue to support the government-led response to the earthquakes. The UN and our partners have provided more than 42,000 tents and hundreds of thousands of blankets, bed sheets, and mattresses. More than 900,000 people have received food assistance, and the World Food Programme has supplied more than 5.7 million food packages and hot meals. The World Health Organization has provided health care to nearly 24,000 people. UNICEF reached 319,000 people, including more than 183,000 children, with hygiene kits and non-food items, winter clothes and heaters, among other critical supplies. And the Türkiye earthquake appeal of $1 billion is currently 10.4% funded, with $104.3 million received. We have an update from our team in Vanuatu following the 2 consecutive Category 4 cyclones and a 6.5 magnitude earthquake which struck the country last week, impacting over 250,000 people. In addition to our staff in Vanuatu, our team in Fiji is deploying 8 staff to support the coordination of international humanitarian assistance, relief, and recovery efforts, as well as information management and human resource mobilization. Our colleagues will also boost support to authorities for rapid assessments, building, enhancing, and restoration of communication services. They will also support with needs assessments, including on logistical matters. Our staff, currently based in Vanuatu's capital, Port Vila, continue to work closely with the government and partners to support coordination and distribute hygiene kits, shelter, food, water, and sanitation, and other primary needs. The president of the International Narcotics Control Board, Jagjit Bavadia, launched the board's annual report for 2022 in Vienna earlier today. This year, the report focuses on the trend towards legalizing the non-medical use of cannabis. It analyzes the various policy approaches from the perspective of the drug control conventions. In its report, INCB warns that the most concerning effects of cannabis legalization is the likelihood of increased use and a lower perception of risk, particularly among young people. The full report is online. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., there will be a hybrid briefing by the Minister of Equality of Spain, Irene Montero, on the sidelines of the Commission on the Status of Women. Then, at 1:15 p.m., there will be a hybrid briefing by the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, on the outcome of the Women in Islam conference and commemoration of the first Islamophobia Day, also on the sidelines of CSW. And last, the regular budget got a boost today, this time from our friends in Manila. This welcome payment from the Philippines takes the number of fully paid up member states to 65, and we say, salamat. And with that, do we have any questions for me before we turn to our guests? Yes, James.
Yes, you said the Secretary-General's back. I don't know if you had a chance to talk to him, but what is I mean, he just returned from Kyiv. Last time he was caught up in missile attacks. Now this latest barrage of missiles, the first for a month, and you've given the outline of all the damage. What's the Secretary-General's personal reaction having just been there?
Well, he always wants there to be an end to all attacks on civilian areas. It's saddening to realize that after this long a time, there continue to be attacks on civilian populations, and for that matter, worrying attacks in and around the Zaporizhzhya plant. And so again, we call for a halt to all attacks on civilian infrastructure and civilian areas.
And as it's clear, yet again, and you've just been saying it, civilian, 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 there is no doubt these are deliberate attacks on civilian areas. Does the Secretary-General believe these are war crimes?
Obviously, in the future, we'll need to see what kind of accountability there is. But it's very clear what international law has to say about the striking of civilian targets. Gregory?
Thank you very much, Farhan. Today, Russian foreign minister said that the Russian part of grain deal is not implemented at all. So what kind of means is the UN exploring to overcome this kind of stalemate with the export of Russian food and fertilizers? Thank you.
We've been talking at some length in recent days about the efforts we've been making to make sure that these exports can go out to the open market. Beyond that, the only thing to say at this stage is that we're continuing to pursue discreet diplomacy, and we're hoping that it will bear fruit. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, the same subject, as James said. In April, Russia is to preside over the UNSC. From the point of view of common sense, do you think that a state that commits war crimes can preside over the UN Security Council?
You're well aware of the rules of the Security Council, including the alphabetical rotation of the member states of the Security Council for the presidency of the Council, which is a policy that is held throughout the lifespan of the Security Council, and we have nothing further to say than that. Yes, Deji.
A quick follow-up on the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Since do you have any statistics or numbers that since the Russian accused that there's hardly export help about their fertilizers, do you have any data? Like, for example, how many tons of fertilizers, how many batches, how many ships have been shipped from European ports since the phase 2? I mean, the last extension of the deal.
Well, the fertilizers are actually traveling on are being exported as a different initiative, not as part of the Black Sea Grain Initiative itself.
I thought it's a package of 3 deals, isn't it?
You could say that. At this stage, the statistics for the 2 things are different. If you look on the website of the UN Conference on Trade and Development, they give you basic figures, and it's clear that with fertilizer more needs to be done, and we are trying, including through the head of UNCTAD, Rebecca Greenspan, to clear up for the way for exports. Regarding the Black Sea Grain Initiative itself, they also have that information on their website, and 23 million tons of grain have been exported under the initiative so far.
So I need to make this clear. So as you described, the deal with the Russian Federation on the fertilizer and food exportation is not part of the Black Sea Grain Initiative.
You're aware that there were different initiatives that were agreed to.
So which one is the Black Sea Grain Initiative?
Agreed to on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
The Black Sea Grain Initiative is focused on exporting essentially exports of food, mainly grain and wheat and corn and other such exports through the Black Sea.
Not the Russian fertilizer.
The fertilizer does not travel through the Black Sea, but through other means. For example, you've seen efforts to free up fertilizer that is traveling through Latvia, and those efforts have been conducted essentially under the leadership of the Secretary-General of UNCTAD, Rebecca Greenspan, who is working with governments to free up exports. And again, we have been reiterating our point of view that these are exports that do not fall under sanctions.
Well, so there's a website on the JCC, the Joint Cooperation Center, to show how many tons of food have been exported via Black Sea, but there's no such resource to show the exportation of the Russian food and fertilizer.
Well, if you look, it's the statistics from the JCC are really about the things that travel through the Black Sea. So if you look at UNCTAD's information, you get information on the overall picture. But the JCC information really applies to what's traveling through the Black Sea.
So on Monday, sorry, too many follow-ups. On Monday,
Yes.
the Rebecca Greenspan and I presume Mr. Martin Griffiths will meet with the Russian delegation next Monday,
Yes, they're meeting in Geneva.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Now let's go on to colleagues. Yes, Edie, you had a question?
The meeting between Rebecca Greenspan and the Russian delegation, do we know who's leading the Russian delegation, and will there be any press availability afterwards?
I'm not aware of any press events that are there. Again, this is a time of discreet diplomacy, so I wouldn't expect that necessarily. But if that changes, we'll let you know. And I think regarding the Russian delegation, you need to get that. I don't have that to provide for you, but you can get that information through the Russian authorities.
And we know that the Secretary General is briefing the membership on the common agenda this afternoon. Will he be briefing us any time in the next week before the expiration?
At this stage, I don't have any briefings or stakeouts to announce in the coming days. If that changes, I'll let you know. I expect that he will do a press briefing a little bit later in the month of March. Yes, Pam.
Yes, those are all my questions. But on the Greenspan meeting on Monday in Geneva, could you just set the scene? In other words, we heard the Foreign Minister Lavrov comments. We know Russia is unhappy with the part of explaining to insurers and shippers about the export to encourage the export of fertilizer. How worried are you, and what thresholds do you think the Russians need to get to on export of fertilizers to renew on March 18th?
Well, I don't speak for them, and in any case, at this point, discretion is an important part of the diplomacy we're doing. So we wouldn't go that far into details. What I can say is that we're doing our very best with the various parties to satisfy their expectations of what the deals that have been struck can achieve, and to make sure that we can continue on the course that we've set over these past months. Yes, please.
Thank you, Farhan. My question regarding the dispute over the mega dam in Ethiopia. Egypt Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri said today that the talks regarding this issue haven't achieved any outcomes, and Egypt will defend its interests and take measures lead to that. Any comment on that?
Well, our comment is simply that we want to make sure that all of the involved countries, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan, work together with each other so that all concerns about the fair use of the Nile are taken into consideration, and that they work with each other in a cooperative manner. Yes, Stefano.
Thank you, Farhan. I know I asked you this, but I ask it again. Maybe you have a slightly different answer. Why the Secretary General didn't go this time to Moscow? Because he was going to Kiev, and I understand you. I understand that you say was no in the plan, but I wanted just to ask it again. There was an attempt before he left to go also to Moscow.
Well, I hate to do this to you, but repeated questions won't give a different answer with me. And so I would just refer you to what I said yesterday.
Okay, so then another question is related to the migrants crisis in the Mediterranean. Just a few hours ago, off the coast of Tunisia, there was another tragedy. Other migrants died. Now, in this case of Tunisia, is in a way related also to the last comments of recent comments of the president to Tunisia about against migrants from sub-Saharan Africa. So, I know is a problem, happens every day, but what really, what there is any talk on trying to resolve a situation where practically we are to the point that every day people dies and nobody cares because as you know, we know the news cycle, it looks like it doesn't make any more news. So what the UN is doing about these people dying in the Mediterranean?
Well, certainly we've wanted all countries to commit to combating trafficking in persons and migrant smuggling and encountering xenophobia and misinformation about migration. And we'll continue to do that. Regarding Tunisia, I'd like to point out that yesterday the International Organization for Migration took note of Tunisia's recent announcement to uphold the values of eliminating all forms of and manifestations of racial discrimination, and they welcome that. But at the same time, IOM has urged states, international actors, media, and all to collectively counter harmful and negative rhetoric, hate speech, and hate crimes. And from the Secretary General's standpoint, I'd like to reiterate his call to all parties to ensure that the dignity and the rights of migrants are upheld at all times, everywhere, regardless of where they're coming from, their race, gender, or any other factors. James?
Yeah, near Jenin, Jabba near Jenin, another Israeli raid, 3 Palestinians killed, 1 injured. Do we have Mr. Wennesland? Has he come out with a statement? You said he always makes statements when there's news.
No, nothing new, but I would refer back to what he said yesterday. He came out with a lengthy statement expressing his concerns at the recent violence, and I would just refer you to what he said there. Today's actions fall under that. Yes, Ephraim.
Hi, Farhan. What does the Secretary General make of the various allegations that the earthquake money, aid that's going to Syria, that only a small fraction of it is actually reaching the victims and the rest is being either hidden or diverted or stored somewhere? Does he have any concerns over that issue?
We want to make sure that all aid money goes to those in need. The aid money that goes to the UN is fully monitored, and we try to make sure at every step along the way that it goes to its intended recipients, and we'll continue to be doing that.
Just a quick follow-up. Can you talk just a little bit about how the monitoring happens? Who does it? How does it happen?
We have a network of monitors throughout the process at every step along the ground, and it is coordinated by the various UN agencies and, of course, by the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Deshi, and then we'll go to our guest.
Okay, 2 more questions. First one, any comments on the protests in Tbilisi of Georgia for the past few days?
Yes. What I can say is that the Secretary General has been following the situation in Georgia. He urges all relevant actors to avoid any actions that may escalate tensions. The Secretary General underlines the importance of the freedom of expression and the unimpeded work of the media and civil society, and recalls the right of people to peaceful protest.
My second question, this Sunday, I believe, United States will switch to daylight saving time. Just feel curious because some parts of the world we don't have daylight saving time. Some part of the world they are just getting rid of it. What's the position from the United Nations on this issue?
We don't have a position on the time zones of different member states, which is within their purview. All right, let's go to our guest.
My question will not be taken, right?